Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. We are about getting through November here.
Getting through the year.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, you know, with the two teams that are actively playing for us, not the best weeks for them, but sure, a heck of a lot of news because of that fact. And with the Mariners section being pretty hefty, you know, despite them being in the offseason, things continue for them. You know, we talk about the most complete coverage in this city of all our sports teams. I mean it. That's why, you know, that's factors into that. So we'll kind of transfer them towards the end of the show so that we can get through the rest of our stuff here, beginning with our Seahawks over in Munich, Germany. It was an early start time. Goodness. And it felt like an early start time in the first half for them. But let's get right into our Seahawks segment, Bel, and take a look at that tough loss to Tampa Bay, who, you know, if they end up going through the rest of this year and they're firing on all cylinders, I'll feel a little bit less bad about this, but just you came out flat in the first half. So let's look to that game in Munich, Germany.
Yeah, like you said, unfortunately, that was a loss. The Seahawks came up short. They lost 21-16. They did have a second half effort there. I unfortunately did not make it to wake up at 6:30.
I don't blame you.
So I caught the second half of the game, but I'll go ahead and send it back over to you to ask what you saw in that first half and what kind of went wrong.
Yeah, I mean, so a few things that, you know, you come into this game that had been like mainstays for these two teams throughout the mainly the first half of the season. You know, Tampa Bay had been historically bad at running the football, 32nd in the league in yards per game.
Yeah.
And they crushed that like through the first half. Leonard Fournette and I think it's Rashad White.
Yeah.
I think Rashad White eventually did leave with an injury, but Leonard Fournette, Munich Lenny, was able to do his thing on the ground and kind of set up Tom Brady and their offense to find Julio Jones for a touchdown in the first half. So yeah, being able to, it was like I said it pretty early on in the game. I said if you're able to hold them to their poor run game, you know, you should be able to minimize what Tom Brady is able to do. And they were able to run the ball on you. After this defense, you know, for the last few weeks has really looked improved, and they just could not stop the run. It was really disappointing to see that. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you know, we talk about Geno Smith, how efficient he's been, how much of a pocket presence he's had. It just wasn't there. You know, Kenneth Walker wasn't able to get anything going in the first half, and really in general. I mean, if we looked at his numbers in the box score, it was pretty poor. DK had a couple nice long receptions, but that's what it felt like all you had in the first half. And I believe it was in the first half he got the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that pushed the Seahawks back from a standard like a 40-yarder field goal to a 55. Jason Myers still made it. But it was interesting, you know. I tend to lean on the to the side of the players with stuff like this because you know it's like the DJ Moore catch that he had against the Falcons where he took his helmet off. He's celebrating a big catch. That's a big moment.
Yeah,
it's a big play, you know. But it was interesting because I guess DK said something and he pointed at the ref. And by what the referees were saying is if once you make it personal towards the ref, it becomes a flag. So I don't know. I just think that was kind of odd. I mean, it didn't end up hurting them in the long run because they got the 3 points there regardless. But first half just looked like your offense, which had been, you know, has been pretty darn good for most of the season, fell flat on their face in the first half. And the defense wasn't able to stop the run. So it was like, were you guys left in the hotel? Yeah, that was a tough first half. Like you said, they did find a way to come up late. Tyler Lockett had a touchdown. Marquise Goodwin had a touchdown. But yeah, it was that first half kind of dooms you. And you know, at the end of the day, I said this after the game, and I felt like the wee hours of the morning, but I had been up since 5 anyway, so that was, you know, my perception was changed. That this team technically is still overperforming.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not mad at it. This Tampa Bay team, it still has a ton of talent. Chris Godwin is still getting back to his full self. Mike Evans is still Mike Evans. Tom Brady's seeming to find some sort of rhythm. Their defense has a ton of talent. Vita Vea, what's his name? 45 on their defense. I know they have Levante David still. Devin White. They got a ton of talent on that defense as well. So, I mean, it's a good team. Just after what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had shown throughout the most part of the season, you kind of figure how we've been going, hey, we should be able to win this one. And just the way you started was really poor, just really poor. So it was tough to wake up at 5 a.m, try to get my bearings, and then watch that at 6:30 because it was like this. The first half was bad. Second half started to play a little bit better. Tariq Woolen had a pick. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But just a tough one. But now you go into the bye week, try to recenter yourself for Las Vegas. I almost said Oakland.
I mean, maybe you get that loss out of the way. You were on a streak there. You won a few games, so it felt like maybe it was coming. And of course, we didn't want it to come. And we sure didn't want to lose a game in Germany where there were several Seahawks fans. So unfortunate, but we'll get to our players of the game here. For offensive, I went with Geno Smith, who really shrug off that bad first half. Went 23 for 33, 275 yards, those 2 touchdowns to Lockett and Goodwin, and 22 rushing yards for himself. So
yeah, the first half was pretty bad. I mean, even in the second half, there was an unfortunate moment where he lost a fumble, but it really looked like he looked more like how he's been playing the season
in the second half. Yeah,
and I'm not worried about him. There was the report that came out earlier. In that morning that the Seahawks do want to extend him, and we'll get to that in team news. And there, I got a few comments, when we post news like that. Sure enough, there'll be comments. We're like, oh, not after this. I'm like, it was one half.
One bad.
I'm not worried about it, and I don't know. I will talk about it when we get to team news. That's I could have gone with Geno as well because nobody else stuck out too far. I went with DK just because of those first few catches he had. It's really like, all right, you're getting the ball to DK. We'll like to see more, but still not a bad stat line at 6 receptions, 71 yards. There were several plays where he got the ball in space and he just ran right at a defender. That's who he is, So I'd like to see that more going forward, seeing more of that balanced offense, being able to get the ball to a guy like Ken Walker, while also being able to look at your receiving core like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Marquise Goodwin's been able to produce. And then your tight ends. I don't blame you at all going for Geno. And the defensive side of the ball, mentioned his name earlier, was wondering if he'd get another pick. Wonder if he'd get one off Brady. Wasn't Brady, but Brady was involved in the play. I'm sure you saw it.
I feel like it might have been even sweeter the way it happened for Tariq Woolen. So yes, that's my defensive player of the game this week again. He did have that interception on Leonard Fournette's pass to Tom Brady. They were trying to do a trick play there. Didn't go as planned. Brady kind of trips and, the ball ends up in Tariq Woolen's hands. So
that was just an odd play. to comment, they kept showing that replay for like 5 minutes in the game afterwards. I was like, all right, I've seen it, but he made a large divot where he had slipped. And to comment on that, there was discussion about the field for this because Bayern Munich plays there. They're a football team, not American football. And there had been all this talk about prepping the field for the game, because obviously it's different. You don't see guys like offensive linemen playing in soccer. It's not, it's different kind of cleats, different kind of movement on that field. And the NFL has had to foot the bill to repair the field there in Bayern because of how they left it. And Bruce Irvin made a comment. He basically called it a bad field. He used different words, but I'll call it a bad field. There were a bunch of comments about it from the players. Tyler Ott, the long snapper, made a comment. Just interesting. There's no blaming the play on it here, but it's just like, oof. You want to be able to talk about player safety. And there's been some talk too about player safety with turf. I think we'll talk about league news. But it was just interesting to see that the NFL has to hey, sorry, here's the security
sorry we
deposit.
ruined your field. Yeah.
So interesting to see that. But you've got a stat here to go back to it on Tariq about his interceptions, and that's pretty solid list to be on.
He now has 5 this season and ties Earl Thomas and Michael Boulware for the most by a rookie in franchise history. So continues to add to his accolades for the year. And yeah, I just don't see any slowing down from him. So expect him to be on this list somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not like any fault to you for picking him either, just because of the success that he's had. I know that a few lists have gone out with. It feels weird with midseason because we used to have 16 games. You could say 8 weeks in. Now it's the 17, and you have to pick. I don't like it. But the NFL had himself and Ken Walker in the top 10, and it's hard to disagree with that. It's really hard to disagree with that, and it's just, again, this was a guy that was mostly considered a project for the Seahawks when he was taken in the draft and through training camp to an extent, and he continues to perform. I went with what I would call the safe pick. Jordan Brooks continues to rack up tackles, 14 total, 11 solo, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass deflection. The pass deflection kind of should have been an interception. Brady threw it right at him, but Brooks was more in the kind of batted out, which is fine. But it's nice to see that he continues to rack up tackles. He's in the top 5 in the NFL consistently for total tackles. So it's tough not having Bobby Wagner, but and that's a whole different discussion. But it's incredible to think that, I know last year, both of those guys, it's like Bobby and Jordan were both like racing each other to be the NFL tackle leader. And Jordan only overtook him because Bobby got injured in that game against Chicago, So he continues to produce. I know that I've seen comments like they want to see, I think they want to see more flashy plays, maybe interception, big hit. But if you can continue to produce, I'll take it. I'll absolutely take it. Even Cody Barton made an impact, and I know I've been tough on him. He got an interception on his birthday, so good for him. But yeah, I went with what I would consider the safe pick because I didn't want to copy and go with Tariq. So
some would say that Tariq is the safe pick. So we'll move on to some injury news here. Inactives against the Buccaneers were Jake Curran, Tony Jones Jr., Brian Moan, LJ Collier, and Tease Tabor. And injuries against the Buccaneers in the second quarter, wide receiver D. Eskridge was listed as questionable to return with a hand injury. It's not a broken hand, so not terrible news.
Big just tough with him, because I know that we've talked about it. I've talked about it for weeks now. Wanting to see more production. And, they've put him on kickoffs and I believe punts sometimes. Just still hasn't been able to make a splash play, hasn't been able to really show what the team drafted him for so high. I say so high as a second rounder, but still, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, where did so-and-so get drafted? And you look at that draft and like, Seattle took him over, like you look at some of the guys that were below him in the list, and that's on scouting, that's on what they see, but it's tough because it's, to an extent, it's like what we had with Rashad Penny for a while. It was like, all right, you've maybe shown, even Rashad shown bits and pieces. I haven't seen much from Eskridge at all. So it's like, when are we going to get that? And, I know he's still on this rookie deal, but it's like that when these decisions come up, whether it's in the camp or whether it's in the heading into free agency, whether to pick up an option to put an offer on the table. It's like some of this stuff where you're not able to make an injury, you're not able to be available. I mean, not able to make a play or not able to be available.
It's tough.
It makes my decision easier.
Yeah.
Or it should. But obviously, I'd like to see him in better health because obviously, then if he's in better health, he can
perform better.
There you go.
Yeah, or perform at all. Also, your defensive player of the game, Jordan Brooks, dealt with some cramps during the game. So
don't need to lose a linebacker.
We'll move on to some team notes as that covers the injury news here. On the 9th, GM John Schneider was nominated for a 2022 Salute to Service Award. Schneider was nominated by the Seahawks for his continued dedication to the local military community. This includes throughout the year, Schneider also supports the team's year-round commitment to the military community that includes inviting over 700 military service members to Seahawks home games, veteran support through our task force, 12 nonprofit organizations, and unique opportunities for the entire military family. So way to support those who have served. On the 13th, as you have teased, it was reported that the Seahawks will work with Geno to keep him past the season. So I'm not sure how much that was expected, but Seattle is expected to keep the QB as its starter into the future with a long-term contract offer this offseason.
Now, when you hear long-term, and if I'm putting you in, we talked about John Schneider's shoes, year-wise, I'm not asking you money-wise because that's his own thing, but year-wise, what are you? If it's interesting to use the term long term, because what does that mean, right? Because Geno's not exactly young, he's not exactly old,
right?
It's kind of like you're in this middle area, and I'm thinking 3 years. If you're talking long, because if I was gonna say 2 to 3, but 2's more short term.
I'd say 3 to 4.
Yeah. So I know that now. Well, prove me wrong and didn't take Malik Willis with that pick where they took Ken Walker. But I know that this upcoming draft is one that's pretty heavy with QBs. So maybe as opposed to going one in the higher rounds, maybe you go with one in the lower rounds, not to stay biased in a house. I'm really interested to see where Michael Penix ends up on draft boards. But it just seems like now with that sort of comment and the way that Geno's been playing and the trust that this team has in Geno Smith, that the idea of a quarterback in any of the higher rounds is kind of off the table, if it had even been on the table.
Right.
Because, again, this is where we were like, oh, they're starting Geno. I remember we talked about that when the decision was made. I had my cold take. We got over that. And it just seems like that's never necessarily been on the table for Seattle. So I'm just interested to see what this means. Because to this point, though, this is something that a lot of people talk about with Tom Brady since we played the Buccaneers this past week. Quarterbacks getting contracts that maybe price you out salary cap wise of certain free agents, right? Or extensions for your other players, So I am interested to see what that looks like money wise, how they're able to spread that around, and over how many years. This long term is a very interesting comment for me. So
I agree. You can chime in and let us know what you think long term means too, because like we said, 3 to 4 is what I thought. But even then, is that really that long? We'll move on to some league news here. On the 7th, the Colts fired their head coach, Frank Reich. The team consultant and former multi-Pro Bowl center Jeff Saturday was named the interim head coach. So he did step in for Sunday's game. He was also an ESPN analyst and had to leave the Monday recording because he was named head coach. It looks like things went well for them because they did end up victorious over the Raiders yesterday. So
yeah, it's a really, I don't know, what do you think about it? Because the guy was an analyst on, I think it was Good Morning Football or so. No, it was on ESPN's show. And I think he had coaching experience in high school. He was a consultant with the Colts for the last 5 years, I believe. And, I know that he left the show recording, but he had to have been talked about this at some point before. You'd think, right? Because there's no way, hey, Jeff, I know you're doing a show today, but we want to name you the interim head coach.
Yeah.
There's no way, right? I mean, it's just really interesting. There was also the comment that this kind of puts a bad spin on, hiring with the Rooney Rule and getting, those.
Oh, good point.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting situation for me with Indianapolis, because I have felt team-wise, not necessarily staff-wise, for a long time that if they get their quarterback, they get a guy that they can trust for years, they'll be a Super Bowl contender with the way their defense is playing. If Jonathan Taylor's able to stick there, could use maybe a few weapons on the outside.
Yeah.
Their offensive line has a ton of talent. They just haven't been playing that way this year. And they've got stopgaps. Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. These are stopgap guys. These aren't, build the future kind of guys. So
it's not the pick that I would have seen as a interim head coach. Normally they would,
coordinator.
Yeah, someone within the staff already. So it's definitely interesting, but I think it'll be more interesting to see how they move after this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So also on the 7th, the Commanders potential buyers group is growing. They have added another well-known name. So Jeff Bezos and Jay-Z's bid for Washington has a new potential investor, Matthew McConaughey, who is a very well-known actor.
Yeah. I know he's a big Texas Longhorns guy. So as long as they get it away from Dan Snyder, I don't care. But it'd be interesting to see what they do with that franchise when they've all like pooled their money and they put their offer in. So
That's also an interesting group of guys there.
yeah. You said Jeff Bezos and Jay-Z. I was like, that is a weird combo.
And now Matthew McConaughey.
Don't know how they all, don't know what it'd be like in a bar with those three. But,
interesting for sure. On the 10th, the NFL and the Commanders are being sued. Attorney General says that Dan Snyder, NFL and Roger Goodell colluded to deceive the residents about workplace investigations. So, not good news coming from Washington Commanders anytime soon. On the 12th, it was reported that there may be more NFL games in Germany. So maybe more 6:30 start times. Commissioner Roger Goodell says that the league might expand on its current plan to play a game a year over the next 4 years in the country. So they may be seeing a lot more of football.
I know the crowd was good. I don't know if you've seen any of the video following it.
I did.
The way the crowd was. I mean, it's nice to see, but it's like I think the field would be one thing, but then also the travel is another because you don't want to just fly in like the day before, be extremely jet lagged. That's what was that? I believe it's a 7-hour flight or something like that.
Gotta be longer. More organized.
I believe it's 9 hours.
Ooh.
I don't know. Something. It's really long. So factor comes into it because I know in the past few weeks the NFL's talked about we've covered on League News talked about playing more games in London and having a division
in London. Yeah.
So it's like
that's I
don't know.
A lot of expansion.
I don't see the feasibility.
Yeah. Well, we'll revert back to our Seahawks here. They have a regular season standing of 6-4, first in the NFC West still. And as you mentioned, they are on a bye week this coming week. So we'll up.
Probably do some looking at mid-season stuff next week.
Okay.
But yeah, bye week, nice to get rested, kind of take a step back. Nice to have a later one in the year because you get like week 5. It's like, oh shoot, I got to play 12 more weeks. But yeah, it just again, if you told me going into the bye week we'd be first in the division and that the Rams would have a 10% chance to make the playoffs, I would think you're a little bit funny, and I might laugh a bit.
And they also lost a division game yesterday.
Yeah, to Arizona in their own house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and might have lost something even bigger in Cooper Kupp's injury. So
the fantasy team.
Well, as Chuck mentioned, we're doing things a little different today. We're going to move the Mariner segment a little bit. So we're going to shift right into our storm right now. And we'll go right into, of course, they're in the off season. So we're still waiting to hear about what the Storm are doing in the off season. But some of our Storm players are overseas. So we'll go over our Storm overseas here. Ezzy Magbegor recently had 18 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals in a EuroLeague game against DVTK term on November 19th. Steph Talbot had 18 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal in a WNBL game against Townsville Fire on November 11th. And Epiphany Prince had 16 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals in a Turkish Super League game against Kankaya on November 7th. So really good numbers from our Storm players overseas here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting looking at this list because I know we're still waiting for Stewie, Gabby, and Jontel just from tracking on there. But nice to see this stuff. I know Steph's down in Australia. With Piff still over there. Again, still interesting to see that Bree was still playing. But
yeah,
just kind of keep track of this while our players are overseas. And, because this is big for, not only for them to get paid more, outside of the WNBA season, but, obviously for like Ezzy getting more of that development, that hot start to the season. And then it's tough with Tina Charles coming in, trying to manage that rotation. I like the addition of Tina Charles. I know that when we had our off season, I wanted to bring her in. But I think I'd like to just stick Ezzy at the 5 and leave her alone throughout the full season.
Okay.
Because
so then you don't see Tina back in Seattle?
I didn't see that in general. Because with our Storm exit interviews, she just didn't show up.
Yeah, I do remember that.
So I wonder, and I know that the goal for her was to win a title, and she was looking for that. She joined Connecticut, and then they just bombed it this year. Came here with us, and it was tough. I mean, Vegas, well, I think I told you after that game, after the game they were eliminated. This is Vegas is probably going to win it all. It's
They looked too good.
oh, not Connecticut. I'm sorry. Tina was with Phoenix. Yeah, I was like, no.
And that was a salty departure.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. But it's Vegas is loaded. That the Storm got a little bit fortunate in 2020 when they played them in the bubble because they weren't at full strength at that time. You could look at the scores, and Seattle blew them out, and maybe they were the team of destiny, and they could have handled them at full strength. But Vegas, the last few years, you think of Vegas, this is a powerhouse. Asia Wilson is Asia Wilson. Kelsey Plum, the fact that they could at times bring Kelsey Plum off the bench is ridiculous. Jackie Young, I get nightmares still.
The one that gives me nightmares still is goodness, how can I not remember her name right now?
Maybe
Point guard.
Maybe shifted. But yeah, that Vegas team is just stacked up and down with talent. And then you look at their coach and Becky Hammond, and it's like, this is just ridiculous. What are you going to do? So this is, they're probably primed to defend their title. Upcoming year, so
that's why it's even more interesting to see what moves we make to.
Yeah. And that kind of shifts us over to draft wise, because it's interesting, to see this, who we're projected here looks fine. I was looking at stats last night. But it's like, how much can you expect a rookie to come in, take over where Sue Bird is? Maybe not take over where Sue Bird is. Maybe you slide Piff there. Maybe you bring in another veteran. I was going to hope for Kelsey Plum this offseason.
I don't think she's going anywhere. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Did she already?
Yeah. During the season last year, I was like, maybe it's Courtney Vandersloot. Maybe she comes to, I know she signed a 1-year deal with Chicago last offseason. Maybe that's like, okay, I'm going to come back to Chicago, wait for Sue to leave, and then we really don't know.
Yeah.
And we probably won't until we get into more kind of primer free agency here. So, but yes, I guess that's better to look over at draft here.
The Storm will have the number 9 overall selection in round 1 of the WNBA draft, and Seattle's projected to take guard J.C. Sheldon out of the Ohio State. God, I've always wanted to say it like that. She has a fun fearlessness in her drives to the basket and her opportunistic defense. Doing these things gets a lot harder in the WNBA, of course, but last season she averaged 19.7 points per game while shooting 50.4% from the field and recorded almost 2 steals per game. So you said you were looking at some stats last night.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Just some of those numbers. 20 points per game, nearly
not bad.
50 from the field, tenacity on defense, but it's just tough with the WNBA and the roster spots, because it'll probably look different this year. I know Seattle's trying to get a lot of veterans on anyway. But what do we do here? So it'll be, again, this is I say this about a lot of off seasons for teams, because a lot of them are in key off seasons. The Sounders coming off of the CCL win, but missing playoffs. How do they rebuild? What do they look like? The Storm, they've only got a few people under contract. Sue Bird retired. Stewie is a free agent. You got Jewel for the next year. Where do you go from here? Where do you go? I'm kind of glad that we sit here behind the table and I'm not in the GM desk, because that's a lot of decisions. Seattle's been a powerhouse for years. The first few years of their existence, tough. And then they added a few teams. You're used to seeing the big three, or at least Sue. Back then, Sue and Lauren Jackson, Sue and Stewie, Sue and Jewel and Stewie.
I think I need the consistency of at least Stewie and Jewel.
Hoping so. Right?
Yeah.
Because now that it's not Sue, this is kind of just hand them the keys to the car. They already kind of had them. But, so I give them the deed to the car at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll move on to some league notes here. On the 11th, it was reported that, of course, the Indiana Fever will have the number 1 overall pick in the WNBA draft. And here is the first round order for the WNBA draft. Indiana Fever, Minnesota, Atlanta Dream, Washington Mystics, Chicago Sky, New York Liberty, Indiana Fever again, Atlanta Dream again, Seattle Storm with that number 9, Connecticut Sun, Dallas Wings, and once again the Minnesota Lynx.
Just interesting there to see Indiana, like they have to take Aaliyah Boston, but they've also got a pick there at 7. Atlanta's got 2 picks in that first round. Minnesota does as well. those teams are, Minnesota, Sylvia Fowles retired. Someone that I wish got more shine with Sue in retirement, because Sylvia is an excellent legend of the game, and that's its own discussion. But you see some of these teams like Indiana, I'm sure in a few years they'll be really good too. They had high picks last year.
Right.
So it might be a situation where it's like we're going to slog through these few years.
They'll develop, and
I can only imagine. Yeah. So I don't know. Interesting to see that, but we've got our own team to worry about. So we'll see how that goes. I'm okay with 9. I don't know. We'll see. And then like a few off seasons ago, maybe they trade their first round pick. Yeah. Seattle was able to. They had the number 1 overall pick at one point, and they traded it. And that trade for Katie Lou Samuelson didn't end up working necessarily too much, because she ended up they didn't bring her back. But I don't know. Interesting.
When do you foresee us getting more off-season moves here in a clearer picture?
January.
That's not too
far. I see it picking up then. Yeah, because camp is more around May. So probably around that. We can get official league calendar here, and I'll look at that. But I think we go quiet for a little bit.
And that about wraps us up for the Storm. We'll move on to our Sounders, who are not in season, but we do still have some important information to report on here.
Yeah, our fellas are, some of them at least, are heading to their national teams to go play in Qatar in the World Cup. So, for that sort of stuff, it's tough, because the first Team USA game is next Monday around the time that we come in the studio. It's just like, I guess I'll watch it, but it's like, man, I'd like to be at one of these watch parties that the Sounders are hosting over at the Armory at Seattle Center, which also, we talk about Seattle Sports World, where the Kraken have one of their team stores. Regardless, some details on those watch parties. On the 7th, the club announced watch party details for the U.S. Men's National Team World Cup group stage matches, inviting fans of all ages to join Sounders FC at the Armory at Seattle Center to cheer on the U.S. Men's National Team. Admission is free. I mean, the Armory is always free to come into, at least, with access to interactive games, prize drawings, a variety of food and drink options, and more. Watch parties are being hosted for all 3 of the group stage matches. USA versus Wales, Monday the 21st at 11 a.m. Pacific time. USA versus England, that's the big one, Friday, November 25th at 11 a.m. And USA versus Iran, Tuesday, November 29th at 11 a.m. Admission, as I mentioned, is free and provided on a first-come, first-served basis, with entry for each match beginning at 9 a.m. Wow. So if you plan to drink during these games, it's going to be a long day. And continuing until the Armory reaches capacity. That's interesting. The Armory is a pretty big place. So while garage and street parking are available, the Sounders heavily encourage those attending to take public transportation, including the monorail. For each party, all Armory food and drink locations will be open, with an additional beer garden space offered for attendees 21 years of age and older. Additionally, the first 1,500 guests to enter each watch party can receive a Sounders-themed World Cup rally towel, while the first 300 Sounders FC season ticket members in attendance at each party will receive an exclusive Sounders-themed World Cup long-sleeve shirt.
Wow.
So if you've got – it's tough, with, the games being played over in Qatar, the time difference.
Right.
11 a.m. on a Monday, 11 a.m. on a Tuesday for the Iran match. It's tough. Friday, I'll probably try that one if I've got the time. Monday, so it's tough, but cool to see that. I always like the idea of watch parties, especially like the Mariners doing so for their wild card games against Toronto at T-Mobile Park. So excited to see that. I'll try to be at least one of those just to see how that goes. So also continuing the World Cup sort of theme here on the 9th, we got the 9th was when all of the national team rosters were announced, all the 26-man rosters, to see who goes to Qatar for this World Cup, which is really interesting. They had to spend a ton of money in Qatar for this World Cup for a ton of things, but also installing air conditioning into the stadium because of how hot it gets right now over there. There's built,
But that wasn't already there?
No, all of this is all built from scratch. Yeah, I think I'll find a video and send it to you on how they did this. It's ridiculous. That's its own thing. We're already too late. It's already happening. So on the 9th, yes, as I mentioned, the rosters were announced. Defender Nuhu was named to the Cameroon national team roster for the World Cup. The 25-year-old currently has 17 career caps for Cameroon dating back to 2018, as well as 6 appearances 5 starts during the World Cup qualifying matches. He has started all 6 appearances during Cameroon's Africa Cup of Nations 4th place tournament run in early 22 that really put him on the map. That run is also currently why he might be up for transfer for the Sounders this offseason. So we'll see about that. I mean, if Nuhu continues to play well in this, it might be bye-bye. Good for him. That's what you want in a way with the MLS. For the longest time, MLS was like development. It's like, okay, younger guys do well here, and then they go off to like Europe.
Yeah.
It's kind of changing now, and you'd like to see that more so we don't lose a lot of our players. But,
Right.
When you're on the world stage and you perform on the world stage, you're going to get attention. You're going to get attention,
Yeah.
right? So in that sort of vein, someone who kind of developed here and did transfer over to, I believe it was Leicester. I believe it was, I forgot who it was. I apologize. Jordan Morris did go over to Europe, suffered an injury, came back this year, and his option's been picked up for next year. Jordan Morris and Christian Roldan have been named to Team USA for the World Cup roster. There was uncertainty with these 2 Sounders here if they'd make it. They both end up making it, which is really cool to see. Christian, spending a lot of time here throughout his younger career, going to UW. Jordan Morris being born in Mercer Island. So, I don't know if you've ever seen Ted Lasso.
Yes.
But I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if there was a marketing team or what, but they paid for billboards in each USA player's home city. That's like a little encouraging message from Ted Lasso. That was cool to see. That was really cool to see. I think it's ours for Jordan Morris is in Soto somewhere. So if I've got the time, I gotta go
look at it. Yeah.
But with our teams not playing there recently, there's not much reason to go to. No, I'm kidding. So we get back to it. Morris, 28, has 49 appearances and 11 goals for the men's national team, including 6 during the the World Cup qualifying matches. The Mercer Island native received his first senior call-up while still at Stanford in August of 2014 and made his debut in a friendly against the Republic of Ireland on November 18th, 2014. Christian Roldan, age 27, has 32 career caps for the men's national team dating back to his debut on July 13th, 2017, when he played 90 minutes over against Martinique in a CONCACAF Gold Cup match. The University of Washington product has 10 career appearances in Gold Cup action, in addition to his 5 appearances during the FIFA World Cup qualifying. So really cool to see those players make the national team rosters. I know that there are some across other national teams that, surely would have liked to make this, but we'll cheer on our guys for the U.S., as well as I'll keep my eye on Cameroon for Nuhu. And as the World Cup progresses, we'll try to keep an eye on our Sounders players specifically and see what they're able to contribute to their homelands, their nations over in Qatar, as we are just a week away from from group stage matches, which is pretty exciting to see. World Cup's always a lot of fun. I always forget about it over the 4 years, but I remember in middle school watching it. The teachers would just put on games during the day in middle school, and we'd just watch the World Cup, stuff like that. It's a ton of fun, So we look over here to the 10th when the Sounders acquired $100,000 in general allocation money for 2023 from St. Louis SC in exchange for a 2023 international roster slot on that day. The move brought Seattle's number of 2023 international roster slots to 7 as the team continues its offseason preparations. Seattle now has 4 open international roster slots heading into the 2023 season, with 3 current international players on the roster, and AB Sissoko, Leo Chu, and Yemar Gomez Andrade. The MLS expansion draft did take place for St. Louis over the past week, and none of the Sounders were taken, which was kind of interesting. There were some interesting names on the list. Someone that I selected in the Sounders season review for Defender of the Year, Jackson Reagan, was a prime candidate, didn't get touched. Some people thought Steph Cleveland would be taken. He's a really solid backup, but St. Louis already has their keeper, so I'm happy with it. Leave my team alone. But interesting to see that adding a new face to the league. So with that
being said, we'll move on to our Seattle Kraken, who have hit some bumps in the road here. They played against the Nashville Predators on the 8th and won 5-1. Very dominant win. Player of the game 1 is Andrei Burakovsky with 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, a 2+-. And our second player of the game was Jordan Eberle with 2 goals, 2 points, a 2+- 1 and 1 takeaway. And then the rough patch started on November 11th versus the Minnesota Wild. They got shut out. They lost 1-0. On the 13th, yesterday, versus the Winnipeg Jets in their retro jerseys, they lost 3-2. Our player of the game there is Brandon Tanev with 1 goal, 1 point, a 1+-, 2 shots, 3 hits, 1 block, and 1 takeaway. Now, normally you don't do players of the game when we have a loss, but how can you not when Brandon looked like he was all across the board there?
Yeah, I mean, you just kept looking down the stat sheet, and I kept saying shots, hits, block, takeaway. That to look over those past 2 games, that one against Nashville put your win streak to 5, first time in franchise history. You play a Minnesota team that you would shut out on the road the past week, and they shut you out 1-0. They're a good team. They're hard. They're physical. They're big, and they beat you 1-0, which is it's fine. But you'd hope to rebound from that. You weren't able to get inside much. They made it really hard to get shots on goal. And so the 13th against Winnipeg in their reverse retro jerseys, they looked a little bit better on offense. They just got some unlucky bounces. Brandon Tanev hit the post. Jordan McCann hit the post and had a couple near misses. And then there was the end of the game. Seattle was leading 2-1 they had about 30 seconds left, and Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of goaded Carson Soucy into a penalty. But when you look at it, it's not to bring up bad memories, but a few weeks ago when the Bills and Packers were playing in prime time, someone did something, and the Packers guy got flagged, and you can see Matt LaFleur say they always get the second guy, and they always do it because Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of jostled with Carson Soucy. Dubois turns around, and Soucy punches him in the back of the head.
Yeah, okay. Now I understand why people were upset, though, because people were upset that Soucy took the bait there.
Yeah, and I saw some like, well, it was interesting with Coach Dave Haxall after the game because he said, from what my understanding was, he was confused. He said, my understanding was that both guys were going to the box, which changes things because, with giving them a power play with a few seconds left, they go up the man advantage. If you take both guys off the ice, there's no advantage. It's just fewer guys on the ice.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But at the end of the day, you can't retaliate. My dad's always told me that, whenever, like a Seahawks would get a flag when I was watching football early on, or that thing with the floor, they always get the second guy. They do, which is unfortunate, but it's just how it happened. And you can't give up that penalty in the game. You gave up 8 total penalties in that game. You spent nearly 20 minutes in the penalty box. It can't happen.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that just can't happen. So frustrating for sure. They're 2 close ones, but definitely frustrating. And, you're halfway through your 6-game homestand. You're still 3rd in the division, but you're starting to lose ground here.
Right.
So
it's always a little tough to pick players of the week when there are more losses than wins. But you went with Martin Jones.
Yeah, we went with our we did it a few weeks ago. The 2 players who recently became new fathers. I think Jordan already has kids, but Martin became a new dad. I went with Martin Jones, and this isn't over the last week necessarily, but just to look at the sort of run that he's been on, as you can see the photo there in the reverse retro, since the 25th of October, he has a 5-win, 2-loss, 1 overtime loss record with a .936 save percentage, was his 5th best in the NHL, a 5.8 goals saved above expected, which is 5th in the NHL, and a 1.64 goal allowed on average, which is 1st in the NHL in that span, which is, now a few weeks.
Right.
This was a guy that, Martin Jones, I sound like Chris Collinsworth. This is a guy, he came over he played with Philadelphia. He's been a long time San Jose Shark. My buddy RJ with Emerald City Hockey is kind of, when we signed him, when we were all at media, during free agency, he kind of goes, unsure about him. He's really played really well. And, when when Philip Grubauer comes back from injury, you'll be able to give him some rest. I'm not starting any controversy. I think that's ridiculous. There have been a lot of guys who have been given a second chance. Will Borgen had a bad year last year. He's been playing a lot better this year. there have been a bunch of guys who the fan base, I believe, is really given a second chance. You have to be able to do that for Philip Grubauer. He's been and it's funny with Martin Jones now playing in goal, because a lot of the times now, if a bad goal happens, the fans are realizing, oh, it's the defense that's giving this up. But they're, whenever we post whenever I'm at morning skate and Grubauer's on the ice, it's not a good sign. I'm like, come on, man. You got to be able, what is this gripe?
Yeah.
And when I get sort of more casual fans that talk to me about the Kraken, they go, that goalkeeper sucks. I'm like, no, you got to watch the games, dude. You got to watch the games. Because if I had a whiteboard and I sit here, or one of those video boards, when we break down the play and I can circle the guy, I'm like, look at this turnover. That's the only reason. You free up a guy, you give the puck back right in front of your goal, stuff like that. I know that there are some where, yes, Gruby is a mistake, but that's with goalkeeping, whether it's in hockey or in soccer, you're going to give up goals at some point. It's going to happen. Sometimes they just beat you. It's the guys, like with the goals saved above expected, for Martin Jones, it's not being able to put your goalkeepers in those bad positions more than they need to be. So I wish people would give Gruby more of some leeway and some respect here, because it's just disappointing. You don't want to see guys, who are trying to work back from injury, people saying, oh, great, and they're just making bad comments. It's just ridiculous. I just think it's ridiculous. So.
Well, fatherhood looks good on Martin Jones on the ice right now. Like you said, he's doing really well. This is his second week on our Players of the Week list. So I went with, I know I always reward consistency, so that's very on par here. Jordan Eberle, who had 3 goals and 3 points in those 3 games. So that was,
hard to argue with.
Yeah, that was my thought process there. Is he scored on both games? So
Eberle was a guy that early in the season, I said it again, that I was waiting for some of that production, and he's looked a lot like this past game when he scored. I'm like, all right, and then he had some plays afterwards, like in the next few shifts. I was like, all right, this guy's ready to go.
Yeah.
So he's looking better. He's one of the more veteran guys on this team, part of that leadership group, and he's been playing like it. So that's good to see as well.
That wraps up our Players of the Week. So we'll move on to some injury news here. And as you've mentioned, we have news on Philip Grubauer. He was on the ice for optional morning skate
on the 8th, as well as this past game. So he's been there. This last game, he was actually doing exercises for the first time that I've seen. The 8th there, he was on the ice, but when I arrived for morning skate, he was probably just wrapping up which is interesting. I'm like, oh man, I wanted to see what was going on. He did some actual goalie practice this past week, but the last a few days ago, he was actually put on long-term IR, which is interesting because IR in hockey is different. You think about IR in the NFL, it's like you're losing this guy for half
weeks,
the season.
a
good amount of time. Here, this was more of a cap space move because they have Jonas Donskoy on IR, Chris Drieger on IR, and now Grubauer. That's a lot of money on IR. Those are just like starting caliber guys.
Right.
So I believe this was just a cap space move, but it seems like he's starting to get back to some point. Martin Jones is holding down the fort right now, but you don't want to overwork a goalkeeper like Grubauer was last year. You don't want to just, it's every night Jones is getting out there. But so some positive news. I don't care what people say on that regard. Good to see that. This next one was not as positive. You lose a guy this is a tough loss, and I don't know how long he'll be out. Yeah.
Jamie Oleksiak has sustained a lower body injury and will miss the game versus the Wild.
Not been back.
Did miss the game versus the Wild. He suffered the injury against the Predators. Oh, and there's no report on. Yeah.
Didn't see him for morning skate. He got placed on IR later in the day. It was interesting against the Predators because he didn't play the entire third period, and we heard lower body, and that's
all we get.
Hockey.
Yeah.
He's a guy that I did it again. He's able to be a big presence on the defensive end of the things. He's a veteran guy, and he's able to move the puck up the ice too. With some of the people that we've had taking his spot in the roster, they haven't. Cale Fleury did some solid stuff. Kosovo Olofsson, who played last night, was the word the kids use is mid. But they don't bring that puck up the ice. They don't add that offensive attack. I talk about putting shots on net. Without Oleksiak, he adds that. He continues to add that from the defensive side of things as well on that second defensive line. So, and it's a tough loss, and we have no idea. And I don't know what the extent of that is, which is unfortunate.
Updates will be reported as we receive them. On we'll move on to some team news here. On November 10th, the team claimed Magnus Hellberg off of waivers. They also recalled defenseman Gustav Olofsson from the Coachella Valley and reassigned goaltender Joey Decord to the Coachella Valley. Any thoughts on those moves?
I don't know if you remember Hellberg, but he had the really cool pads. And so he gets brought back because Ottawa placed him on waivers. They did this move so Decord could go back to Coachella and sort of keep him down there because they don't want to put him on waivers and expose him to potentially being picked up. They want to keep Joey around is the point. And so they've got more of a veteran backup now for Jones and Hellberg and someone who spent time here in the preseason. Olofsson only came up because of Alexiak on IR. So Hellberg's a cool guy. Seeing him in practice lately and seeing him in the locker room yesterday, he was talking with a few members of the media saying that when he left Seattle, there were guys online saying, hey, can I get your pads? You know, he gets to use them again, which is cool. But
so he didn't give them away.
They were back out there. But it was funny that someone was saying that when we play Ottawa, that he should wear one pad Seattle and one pair Ottawa.
That would be
at least during morning skate.
Yeah.
It's funny. Some of the equipment in this game is really cool. So
we'll make sure to get a picture of that if that's actually seen at morning skate. I'll do my best. We'll move on to some league news here. On the 10th, PK Subban is headed to ESPN. Longtime NHL defenseman, Norris Cup winner, PK Subban, is joining the network as an analyst. On the 11th, it was reported that the World Cup of Hockey is postponed. The NHL union announced that the international tournament scheduled for February will be delayed for at least 1 year. On the 12th, the NFLPA called out for turf change.
Oops.
That's in the wrong section.
Oops.
But do you want to go over that?
Sure. I mean, that just goes back to what we were talking about with, player safety. That's on me. I put that in the wrong I was like, wait a minute. What are you saying? That's on me. But yeah, players union president J.C. Treader
rolling off my mouth.
wants NFL to ban slit film turf to increase player safety. Someone made a comment the other day, I heard. I was actually yesterday at the Armory before the Kraken game. Phil Dixon, he works with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. You can see where this is transcending from baseball to football.
Hockey, football, baseball.
Yeah, but with the turf and the grass.
Yeah.
He said he heard from a player, if a horse can't eat it, I don't want to play on it, which is interesting. Turf, with all these injuries, with the Seahawks going to LA playing at SoFi Stadium, some of the players going to the Rams, we've seen a lot of this has happened over the course of years too. Joey Bosa, I believe last year, a few years ago, same thing. Nick Bosa, with the Niners. Yeah. So this is a consistent thing. Pete Carroll talked about it a few weeks ago with the Seahawks and Lumen Field, which will be big because they'll have to do so for the World Cup anyway when they host it in 26. But yeah, really, really interesting to see this. But to look at some of the hockey news, Subban, that's really great to see. With I talked about it with Everett Fitzhugh on our interview here in the Black Media Matters studio. Having so limited Black presence in hockey, having Subban as an analyst is great. It's great to see, have his face on TV. I talked with Council President Juarez yesterday when we talked about, Indigenous people in hockey and, having Jackie McCormick honored. Representation is big everywhere because if I see a player on the ice in hockey, but that's great. But if I don't go pro, knowing that there are people in different aspects of these sports, like with Subban as an analyst now, front office, different stuff like that. Representation matters all the time.
It does.
And that's that there. World Cup of Hockey. Come on.
A year?
Yeah. That's unfortunate. That's just unfortunate.
That's a long time. Yeah. We'll get back to our Kraken here. They have a 8-5-3 record. They're third in Pacific and have 19 points currently in the season. Looking ahead, they will face the New York Rangers on the 17th. That's a 7 p.m. puck drop. And then on the 19th versus the LA Kings, also a 7 p.m. puck drop. And we move over to our OL Reign, who are once again not in season, but we still have news.
Yeah, so like with the Sounders' off-season preparations, quote unquote, the Reign are preparing as well. They've extended last week. They extended Quinn through 2024, I believe it was, or it might have been 2 weeks ago. This week on the 8th, the team extended defender Sam Hiatt to the 2024 season. Hiatt said, "I am so proud to continue representing and playing for my home state team. Winning the Shield at Lumen was a dream come true, but I know we have bigger goals in mind, so I can't wait to return next season and contribute to our success. It's always been an honor and a privilege to play for the Reign." Hiatt, in her third season with the club, started in all 19 games, playing for a total of 1,710 minutes. It's tied for the second most played on the team with former Stanford teammate, Alana Cook. The 24-year-old led the Reign in appearances with 81 clearances, finishing the season ranked 10th in the league. Additionally, Hiatt finished third on the team in successful passes and registered 58 duels won, the third most among Reign defenders. I'm biased because Hyatt's Filipino and I'm Filipino, and she's a local product. So this is awesome. Again, representation. Like with hockey, there's like one Filipino player in the league, and it's Jason Robertson, and he might be one of my more favorite players. With this, seeing someone who is a local product, who is Filipino, that's really cool to see. But not only that, but knowing that, we went over the stats there, 24 years old, already part of a great pairing in the center back role with Alana Cook. Locking up this back line is big. It's interesting to see this back line because if we look at the center backs, I just talked about Hiatt. Cook is also really young and is going to be a big part of the U.S. women's national team as well, and already has been. But you look on the outside back side of things, Sofia Huerta, already a big part of the women's national team. Playing outside back is big. I remember when I did an interview with her in 2021, she was playing more of a midfield forward role, and she talked about playing outside back. And then halfway through the season, she changed. So I have
That's pretty cool.
And with Lou Barnes on the outside, someone who's your captain, someone who wears the captain's armband, also has that veteran presence, just a steady player. To have that back line and locked up is big. In these sports, I'd like to have defense locked up. Defense wins championships, that old football adage. Good to have that locked up because, you've got that back line of four there, and then you've got Fallon Tillis-Joyce locked up, and you've just got a really solid group of people protecting your net. So really happy with that. I wouldn't, this is also an interesting offseason for the Reign as well, coming off of, winning the Shield, but losing in the semifinal again, still not being able to make that hump of the NWSL title. They've got a lot of talent in this roster, and I believe the talent in this roster can win it all. I just wonder, I'm always a better safe than sorry guy. What if you do bring in someone with the first ever NWSL free agency taking place this offseason? Do you bring someone in to take you over the edge, put you over the top, just for safe measure, right? Better to have more than to have less. I'm really intrigued to see if that's something that plays out, if that's something that we get to look at. But I don't know. I feel like there's not a lot of extreme measure needed to be taken with this roster to get there. I think it's more of most of it's don't broken, but feel free to add some stuff to upgrade. So that's where I stand with that, and I'm happy that they've been extended. But I know we'd switch over to Dragons announced, the XFL announced draft dates, but just got this news a little bit ago. The Seawolves, the MLR season schedule drops tomorrow. So we'll be able to know more of a plan when we can get back to our Seawolves, get back to coverage for that, kind of start planning things out, throwing things in the calendar. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
We were waiting on that. We're like, we don't know, maybe February. So that'll be exciting to see. And I'm hoping to hear more about that expansion team. I still don't know. But we'll look over here with our Dragons, our Sea Dragons. I have to add, it's so close. The XFL draft dates were announced. So they'll take place in Las Vegas from November 15th through 17th, with the 16th being the first official day of the draft. 1,700 players will vie for 28 training camp spots. Then there will only be 400 active player roster spots. So it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a tight spot. So I guess I won't show up for tryouts. Day one will be broken into 4 positional groupings with 11 rounds of selections for each grouping. Offensive skill positions at wide receiver, running back, tight end, and fullback. Defensive backs, cornerback, safety, nickel. Defensive front 7, offensive line. Day 2 will then feature specialists, kicker, punter, long snapper, followed by open rounds for all available positions. Supplemental draft for players currently, this is interesting, under contract with another professional football league
Who could that be?
Will occur in early 2023, so probably a little bit later.
Yeah.
XFL football operations will conduct a virtual lottery, which took place today to determine the order for the draft. In addition to league personnel, each team will be present and represented. So Seattle has the 6th overall pick in the first draft, which it was first round, which isn't bad.
No,
Not bad.
that's not bad.
I'll dig it. Just really interesting to see. I'm more interested to see what players are going to be available, who's going to put their hat in the ring, whether it's like former college standouts who never made it big in the NFL.
Ooh, that's a good point.
There was a player in the XFL this last time around who opted out of playing some college time out of his eligibility, but there and played XFL ball. And I think he got an NFL contract. I don't remember the name. I apologize. But it's interesting to see because, again, the XFL and the NFL do want to work on a partnership, another professional football league. It is interesting to see PJ Walker with the Panthers, XFL. He was going to be one of the he was like MVP frontrunner, So it'll be really interesting to see who's playing in this league. I'll like to keep track of that. So that is that for Sea Dragons, and now we have our pretty hefty Mariners segment that I will try to work through as best I can. And I'll work through that. Bel's got to run, but it's all good news. Luckily, there's nothing too negative to look at here. So we'll get into Mariners immediately to try to pound through this. Julio Rodriguez, surprise, surprise, was named an AL Rookie of the Year finalist. The 21-year-old led Major League rookies in homers, BWAR, F4, slugging percentage, OPS, WRC+, total bases, ranking second in runs, third in hits, second in RBIs, second in extra base hits, second in stolen bases. And the list could go on. Overall, he batted at .284 with 84 runs, 25 doubles, 3 triples, 28 homers, 75 RBIs, 25 stolen bases, 40 walks, getting on base at a .345 clip, slugging .509 with an .853 OPS in 132 games. He missed 21 of those with a pair of stints on the 10-day injured list. Julio has already been named the Baseball America Major League Rookie of the Year, the Sporting News American League Rookie of the Year, and the Players' Choice Awards AL Outstanding Rookie in 2022. So it's kind of a foregone conclusion, essentially, what's going to take place. The official award is announced later today. By the time that this episode goes live, that'll already have been announced. We'll have a graphic for that, obviously. I'm kind of going ahead and saying it, but I just kind of doubt it'll be anybody else. No disrespect to Adley Rutschman or Stephen Kwan, but Julio is going to be one of the bright stars of baseball for years to come. He was named to the AL All-Star team, the only rookie All-Star in 2022. He became the third Mariners player age 21 or younger to be named the All-Star, joining Ken Griffey Jr., who did it twice, and Alex Rodriguez, who did it twice. He participated in the MLB Home Run Derby, hitting the most homers total and finishing in second place to Juan Soto. He became the first player with 25 homers and 25 stolen bases in his debut season in MLB history, as well as the fastest to do so, surpassing Mike Trout by 3 games. If Julio were to win this award, he would be the 5th Mariner to win AL Rookie of the Year, joining Alvin Davis back in 1984, Kazuhiro Sasaki in 2000, Ichiro Suzuki in 2001, and Kyle Lewis back in 2020. So after all of those words, if you don't understand how special of a talent Julio Rodriguez is, maybe something else to put it in perspective. Everybody here should know who Ken Griffey Jr. is. Throughout the majority, probably the outright majority of the MLB season at T-Mobile Park, I saw more 44 jerseys than 24 jerseys. I don't need to say much more than that. So also on the awards slate, manager Scott Service was named in the AL Manager of the Year finalists, and I'm hoping that he finally wins it this year after being in the running last year as well. Service led the Mariners to 90 wins and a postseason berth this year, finishing the regular season with a 90-win, 72-loss record for the second straight year. 90 wins in both 2021 and 2022. Service became only the second Mariners manager in club history to lead Seattle to back-to-back 90-win seasons. He joins Lou Piniella, Sweet Lou, who managed the Mariners to 3 consecutive 90-win years in 2000, 2001, and 2002. After the Mariners had a slow start to the season that left the Mariners with a 29-39 record on June 20th, Seattle would go on a 61-33 run over the remainder of the year. That 649 winning percentage was second best in the AL during that span and featured a 14-game win streak, just one game shy of the franchise record win streak at 15, from July 2nd through 17th. With Scott Service at the helm, the Mariners had the knack for winning close games, including the most one-run wins in MLB at 34, 13 walk-off wins tying a franchise record, an 11-5 record in extra innings, which is the best win percentage in the American League, and 40 comeback wins at third in the AL. Through 7 seasons since Scott took over as the manager in 2016, Seattle leads Major League Baseball in both one-run wins at 189 and one-run winning percentage at 573. He has compiled 528 managerial wins and 512 winning percentage during that span, both ranking second best in franchise history, only behind Lou Piniella. If he were to win this award, he will join Lou Piniella, who did it in 95 and 2001, as the only other Mariners manager to bring home the award. And I do believe he should win it. The other two managers that were in this contest are Orioles manager, Brandon Hyde, I believe his name is, and the Tampa Bay Rays manager. So 2 other teams that didn't make the playoffs. I think it should be Scott. I have to admit, I was on the fence about Scott a few years ago, back in 2020 and 2019. I was like, I don't know if this is the guy that leads you to the postseason. He's proven me wrong. He's got a great respect in this clubhouse, in this locker room. And all of my doubts that I had about Scott are gone. So that's my opinion on that. We look over to some ticketing news. The Mariners announced new value options for the 2023 season. The team announced that beginning next year, fans will have the opportunity to purchase $10 center field bleacher tickets every regular season home game. The announcement doubles down on the commitment to make Mariners baseball more accessible. Also, in addition to this, the J-Rod squad section will stick around all year in celebration of Julio Rodriguez's breakout season. The Mariners are putting a new twist on the popular J-Rod squad seating section, which was introduced last year. The $25 special will include a limited edition J-Rod squad shirt and general admission ticket for any seat in sections 102 through 104. So it's a first-come, first-served basis. This general admission section, located directly behind where the AL Rookie of the Year frontrunner plays defense in center field, was created to make socializing easier while creating a unique fan experience. Pre-sale for these single-game tickets begins on November 22nd for the general public. If you are a Mariners Text subscriber and a Mariners season ticket holder, you do get earlier access, as well as those who are actually living in the King County area do get earlier access as well. Another thing that was announced just today, the Pen will be open to the general public all 81 home games. I know this is something that people were upset about throughout the year, that people had rented out the Pen and there was only a few people in there not watching the game. So the Pen will be a little bit more active throughout the entirety of the regular season and the postseason next year. We go to the GM meetings where Jerry Dipoto has some comments about the team. On the 8th, the team was interested in Japanese star Kodai Senga. Seattle views the Japanese star as an impact pitcher, and they plan to reach out to him. He has a 2.59 career ERA in the NPB. Also on the 8th, Julio Rodriguez was voted as the Baseball Digest AL Rookie of the Year. The team will add relief pitcher Prelander Berroa to the 40-man roster, to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. A handful of other players will be added as well, but they have not been informed yet. Jesse Winker had knee and neck surgeries, and the hope is that he can start swinging a bat in January. Made a comment about J.B. Crawford, saying that our preference is that he plays shortstop because I think he's a good shortstop, and all of the things that I said at the end of the year wrap-up remain true today. We'd like him to be our shortstop for the foreseeable future. They won't offer Mitch Haniger a qualifying offer, but they are engaged in trying to bring him back for next season. Dipoto confirmed that Cal Raleigh underwent a procedure on his broken left thumb, but did not have details on that recovery. Andres Munoz also had foot surgery. On the 9th, he stated that the team plans to have Matt Brash come to spring training stretched out as a starter for depth purposes, but will move him back to the bullpen if the rotation remains healthy and unchanged. Chris Flexen has drawn plenty of trade interest at the trade deadline and continues to be asked about. Seems likely that Flexen could be moved in a package of players to get a position player. One team that's been interested has been Colorado. Marco Gonzalez has also been mentioned in trade discussions as well. Some roster moves were also made that day. Left-handed pitcher Gabe Spire was claimed off of waivers from the KC Royals. Right-handed pitcher Easton McGee was acquired from the Boston Red Sox for cash considerations. Left-handed pitcher Ryan Barucki was cleared waivers and elected free agency. And Casey Sadler cleared waivers and elected free agency as well after being the Mariners' top reliever statistics-wise in 2021. Continuing over to, I told you there's a lot of stuff to go over. On the 10th, 5 Mariners are eligible for all MLB honors, which is a voted upon accolade. Julio Rodriguez, Eugenio Suarez, Kyle Raleigh, Eric Swanson, and Andres Munoz are all eligible to be voted to the all MLB team. That is still available. The Mariners have tweeted out that link. So go and vote for our Mariners. We go to the 10th year, and perhaps some little more exciting news. Julio Rodriguez won the AL Silver Slugger Award. The 21-year-old won the award alongside fellow outfielders Aaron Judge and Mike Trout. Julio ranked 3rd among outfielders in B-WAR, tied for 5th in homers, tied for 3rd in stolen bases, 3rd in slugging percentage, 3rd in OPS. He batted at a 284, with 84 runs, 25 doubles, all this stuff that we already went over. The 21-year-old fielder is the 2nd Mariners rookie to win a Silver Slugger Award, joining Ichiro Suzuki in 2001. Julio is tied as the 2nd youngest Mariners player to win a Silver Slugger Award with Ken Griffey Jr. at 21, but he is older than Alex Rodriguez, who won it at age 20. I don't see Adley Rutschman or Stephen Kwan winning a Silver Slugger Award. Again, this continues to help Julio's chances. On the 13th, the team reportedly has done extensive scouting work on outfielder Masataka Yoshida. The Mariners have done extensive work on the Japanese outfielder and will reportedly be one of his top suitors this winter, which is interesting to hear. Wrapping up team news here over the past week, the Mariners have announced their 2023 spring training schedule. They will play 10 games in Peoria as we put the entirety of the schedule here. Friday, March 18th at the Padres is a 1:10 start. Saturday, March 19th versus the Dodgers is a 1:10 start and will be televised on Root Sports. Sunday, March 20th will be versus the Angels at 1:10. Tuesday, March 22nd versus the Cubs is 1:10 as well and being televised on Root Sports. Friday, the 25th versus the White Sox at 6:40. Monday, the 28th versus the Rangers at 1:10. And then all of these games, including the one I just stated, are all on Root Sports. The March 29th game versus the Royals at 1:10. March 31st versus the Guardians at 6:40. April 2nd versus the Brewers at 6:40. As well as April 4th versus the Diamondbacks at 1:10. So you can see here the full spring training schedule. If you need to, feel free to pause it and take a look at it. And, I don't want to put out too much right now, but, obviously with our Mariners here, you saw that we had coverage of our ball club all season long, and CSS on Converge might be joining you for spring training. So keep an eye out for that. But that's not for a few months. So we look over to league-related news on the 7th. Some headlines around baseball. Red Sox shortstop Xander Bogaerts and my prime signing amongst the free agent shortstops, and Mets pitcher Jacob deGrom officially opted out of their deals, testing free agency. Angels GM Perry Menzazian says that Shohei Ohtani is not going anywhere this offseason and will not be traded, but several GMs around the league don't believe that's true. And the Phillies declined option on second baseman Gene Segura, former Mariner. On the 10th, the Astros, just a few days after celebrating their World Series title, fired both their general manager and their assistant GM James Click, rejected the team's one-year contract offer and will not return. So immediately after that World Series takes place, these roster moves, free agency, and the MLB offseason really kick into gear. And who knows, by the time that we come to you next week, we'll obviously have news about whether or not Julio won Rookie of the Year, but we could have more stuff relating to the team as well. So apologize for going a little bit over our normal times here. Glad to have Bel back in studio for the large majority of the week. I'm going to wrap up here really quickly. I apologize. Our star of the week, Martin Jones, he continues, just to go back to what we said in the Kraken segment, continues to be excellent in net, just a stand-up, great goalkeeper. Wish the team was able to put him in more winning positions. A new father as well, and just continues to honestly overplay expectations. So that's our star of the week, but we got to get us out of here. So our Seahawks will get their bye week this upcoming week, and we'll look at some half-year sort of awards and stats for them. The Kraken have a busy week. It's only 2 games, but they're playing some good teams in New York and LA. and a bunch of our off seasons continue to roll on. So until we see you next week, do whatever you can to make today a great day.
Thank you.